Broadcasting from the heart of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I am your host, as always, David Gornoski, and I'm glad that you've joined me once again. The number to call if you'd like to be a part of the discussion today is 407-916-5400. That's 407-916-5400. And boy, do we have a lot to get to. Wow, did you see? Man, it's been another apocalypse. I mean, every week, it's like we get the weekend off, and then right on Monday, we get a new cycle of outrage where it's a meltdown. It's a Nazi fascist storm that's destroying our country. Every week, we got something to just freaking melt out about. And, you know, I'm just kind of over that. And I know you guys are too. And that's what we do here on A Neighbor's Choice. We deal with groupthink. We get rid of groupthink and we start learning how to think as persons using the principles of the historical Jesus to imitate his model for organizing our lives and solving the problems that we face. And so, you know, in 2006, if you recall, we had millions of protesters in the streets protesting Bush's Iraq war. They were protesting a war that they felt was unnecessary. And now here it is, 2018, we have millions of people protesting, shouting down people in restaurants, and they're protesting because a Republican president wants peace with the nuclear power. So what, my goodness, what has happened that the once noble anti-war left has just become in bed with perpetual war? I mean, the only time, if you recall, the only time the media has given Trump a break is when he sent some of those missiles onto Assad in Syria. I mean, they hushed in awe and they said, wow, thank you. You've got right back on script, just like we hoped that you would. And then he didn't quite go as far as they wanted. He didn't do a no-fly zone like Hillary Clinton promised during the campaign. And so they went back to hating him the next day. And so you see, whether it's North Korea or Putin, the media is just having a meltdown over the idea that Trump would have peace with people who have been our perpetual scapegoats for generations. So, you know, they try to make a big deal about, wow, oh, can you believe it? He is treasonous for meeting with Putin. And meanwhile, and it's all about this alleged collusion that's not been proven. Not one piece of fact has come out to prove any collusion between Trump. And yet, you know, they said the same virtual thing about North Korea, and no one is suggesting that there's any kind of North Korean collusion that was happening during the campaign with the Trump administration. So we see that it's just a useful narrative to justify why the Democrats lost so badly when they had 90% of the media shilling for their candidate, giving her the questions before the debates. You know, she outraised everybody. She had support from, foreign people like, some scary billionaires of her own that she has, including some people in Russia. And yet none of that, is ever covered by the media, because what the media wants to do is keep us stuck on the groupthink that we cannot have friendship with Russia, because how else can you justify a $1 trillion annual spending bill that is usually funding the Pentagon? $1 trillion we spend, give or take, each year on our foreign policy. Now, how else can you justify that if you have a president who's saying, hey, I think I'd like to be friends with North Korea. Let's open up trade. Let's open up dialogue. And the same goes for Russia. I mean, they are a nuclear power. And, it reminds me of the biblical story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. In that story, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Yeah, well, that's what we have here with Putin. He's a little short too, by the way. But, there's this idea that in the Bible story that the crowd, they're outraged. They don't like Zacchaeus because he's considered an enemy of the people. He is a tax collector, and he is in league with Rome. In fact, tax collectors during that time were often giving a lot of handouts and giveaways from Roman authorities. They were kind of like colluding, right, with the enemy of the people of Israel. And so there was a lot of people that hated Zacchaeus because he was a rich tax collector. He was young, and he was really taking advantage of people, they felt. So they wanted to exclude him from being able to see Jesus, but Jesus looked over the crowd and said, I'm going to have dinner with you. Now, Zacchaeus, the crowd says, he is a filthy sinner. You're going to be breaking bread with him? And that's exactly what the media is doing with Trump. They're saying, oh, if you were to have you're going to have dialogue with a foreign enemy. And of course, that's the whole same dynamic going on here today. We don't need to be saber rattling with a nuclear power. The people of Russia are very pro-American in terms of the actual citizens. And we know that sanctions don't work. In fact, before Obama's administration slapped on the sanctions and engineered the coup in Western Ukraine, or helped support it, the Russian population was very against Putin. There was a lot of internal resistance to his corruption, and there was a growing momentum to get reform. And that was all wiped out because of the Obama administration's sanctions and the support for saber rattling and arming and aggressively, antagonizing and saying that they're the villain of all villains. And so if we understand that what Trump's offering is, hey, let's have dialogue. And I think if you would go further and say, let's have trade, let's get rid of trade barriers between the countries. Let's get rid of some of the travel restrictions between the countries. And when you do that, it would be the greatest attack against Putin's internal power, because the population would have friendship with America. I mean, that's what happened with Vietnam. Once we opened up trade and travel with Vietnam, we don't have any problem with Vietnam. We get along with them. We have a lot of trade and a lot of mutual benefit from both countries, a lot of travel. The same thing can happen on a bigger scale with the world's second nuclear power in Russia. And so the problems that we have, they're really easy to solve. You just have to have the courage, folks, and I know you have the courage, to rethink groupthink, to challenge the sacred cows of Washington that always divide us and put us into these artificial camps where we're not allowed to question. And that's what I'm proud of Trump for doing that. I think it's one of his shining moments so far in his administration that he was willing to take on the heat from the establishment Republicans and Democrats and meet with someone who is considered a foreign villain and say, hey, look, if we make friendship with these guys, we can actually neutralize the problems that Putin faces. We can actually give the people of Russia an incentive to reform their internal government. And that's the way Jesus always taught us to do. He says, do not resist evil with violence, turn the other cheek. That's not a passive thing. That's a proactive way of allowing corrupt evil to fall on its own weight. That's what we have with Jesus' model. We have a proactive way of not picking sides and group tribalism. But look what we have today. We have people who are more outraged that Trump is trying to change old status quo groupthink in Washington, that they're willing to risk nuclear war with Russia. And it's insane. I mean, I just want to know, when is it going to end? I mean, already Trump has added more sanctions. He's allegedly, there's been reports that he ordered the killing of 200 Russian soldiers who were contract soldiers in Syria. I mean, what do they want? They want 10,000? I mean, what exactly does the whiny victims on the left, what do they really want? They're just pouting, and what they're pouting, look, I don't mind pouting. You can pout. I don't want to listen to it, but I am going to speak up when you're trying to threaten the safety of the world. That we could go into World War III with nuclear bombs flying left and right. I mean, Reagan had the courage to sit down and talk to the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. And he had dialogue with him, and he was able to really neutralize a lot of the tensions where we could have had a world-destroying epic collapse. And so there is a precedent in American tradition. If you go back even to the founding fathers, John Quincy Adams, he said, America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. And that is the principle of strategic independence. It doesn't mean that you can't have a robust self-defense. Of course you can. It doesn't mean that you can't, trade. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you have free trade, free travel, but you don't go sanctioning and starting all this saber rattling. First of all, we can't afford it, folks. We can't afford it. We're in debt with trillions of dollars. We just can't afford to be spending all this money to defend Germany or, all these other people in Europe. So we have to really have the courage. Don't worry about the negativity, people. They're just squawking. I mean, they squawked about Bush as if he was an unprecedented fascist. Now they love him. I mean, they just switched. They changed their ideas like their clothes. So they're really just kind of, don't take what they're saying seriously. But we do have to be firm in speaking out for what's true, what is the best course for our prosperity, peace, and liberty in the world, and taking care of people here at home and not getting into debt just to appease the special interest in Washington who make money off of this endless fear-mongering. So we're going to have a jam-packed show today. We have a YouTube star coming up from Kevin's Corner, Kevin Ellerby. He'll be joining us in just a moment. You are listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski, and you're listening to News Radio 102.5 WFLA.